Have you done it?
Yeah.
Oh, well, no. Good afternoon. And how's everybody tonight? How's Tim?
Yeah, not too bad. I think the summer is over down here. It's chucking it down at the moment.
Yes, I dipped down to the allotment just before I came and intending to water, but
Yeah, no need for that.
probably needed it. I did water the peas and beans, but no, the rest of it. Well, the thing is, it's very, very dry. Our ground is chalk over sand, so the water doesn't stay; it disappears pretty quickly.
Well, if you get what we're having, then you've got about another day of it overnight and into tomorrow.
Yeah. Whereabouts do you live? Carmarthen, did you say?
Cardiff.
Cardiff. That's south?
Yeah, it's sort of on the Severn Estuary.
Just been looking at some houses in the Pembrokeshire area.
Ah, very nice.
You can get a lot for your money there.
Well, yeah, you need lots of money to be able to live down there. There's not a great deal of work down there. You know, so in a way you can get the housing. It's as if you're off the tourist bits, and the housing can be quite cheap.
But there's
Yeah, obviously the tourist ones you're going to pay a load for because people buy them as second houses. But yeah, I mean, the oil refineries down Milford Haven way are the only really big industries. They've been cutting jobs hand over fist the last few years. So, you know, other than that, there's not a great deal down there.
how's the transport, the road system?
Roads not too bad. You've got the main A40. That runs down. You've got a railway line that runs to Tenby and Pembroke. There's another railway line that runs over to Haverfordwest. Yeah, so not too bad. There's a toll bridge between the two if you go by road across the Cleddau Estuary. But yeah, it's just a long way from anywhere in that sense. I mean, if you wanted to commute anywhere, it's going to take you a while.
Yeah, I imagine so.
It's a fantastic place to be. I mean, you've got the Pembrokeshire Coastal Path, which is a national park. Yeah, and that is well worth visiting. I mean, it's spectacular. But as I say, most of us only tend to go there for the odd week or two during the summer. I'm not sure it'd be as pleasant midwinter.
No, no.
But the big beach down there is called Newgale. If you look on a map, you've got St Bride's Bay right to the southwest of Wales. So actually quite a big bay, and Newgale is at the western end, at the eastern end of the bay. So it's kind of all of the weather comes in and hits Newgale Beach. So last winter, when we had all of the storms came through that produced all of the flooding further up the country, the beach at Newgale effectively got moved back 200 yards and covered the road. So I think they had quite a while where you couldn't get through and that's the main road down towards Fishguard. You know, so again, kind of not a lot of people driving back and forth through there over the winter. So yeah, it can be quite exposed to the weather.
Thank you. You can buy a nice 3-bedroom house with a 7-acre plot for the same sort of money. You get a tiny little, well, if you're lucky, you might get a tiny little flat in this area. It's quite a significant difference.
Yeah, but as I say, it's the work situation that tends to be why the price difference is there. I mean, obviously, anywhere that's within an hour or so's commute of London is going to be through the roof.
Of course.
You know, whereas obviously then by the time you get down to West Wales, you're about 200 miles west of London. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to commute from there.
Oh, I don't think
people do from here. And it's probably, I mean, it's about 2 hours on the train, but then sort of add an extra hour either side of that to actually get to and from the railway stations. You know, so you could be looking at about 3 to 4 hours commuting before you've done any work.
Yes.
As I say, people do. And there's a lot of people, there's an early morning train, I'm trying to think, it must be about 5:30. That if you ever catch that up to London from Cardiff, it's full of people commuting. So it's all of the people going into the city with their smart suits and what have you. I just wonder whether it's worth it.
I guess it depends a little bit whether you can do half your work on the train on the way in, whether that counts.
Well, when I used to do it, that's the only thing I could ever do at that time of the morning was have a snooze.
Yes, we do some crazy things in life, don't we? But not that I was particularly considering going somewhere else to work. I was more considering 7 acres is a good bit of ground to grow things on. I could set up a huge aquaponics centre and keep all my bees, but obviously it has to go somewhere to be sold. So that might be the problem bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly worth looking at. In fact, anywhere in Wales, once you get away from the sort of Cardiff Newport area, the property prices are going to be fairly cheap comparatively. So again, if you went up into mid Wales, and the prices are going to be okay. I probably could create at least 3 jobs, if not 4, very quickly, I should think. But yeah, at Blaenau Gwent, you could buy an entire housing estate for the cost of a London flat.
Sorry?
I said Blaenau Gwent, you'd be able to buy an entire housing estate for the price of a flat in London.
It seems crazy, doesn't it? What we are prepared to pay for in order to get close or proximity to spaces, and it seems crazy to me that we have to come to London to do it, because what they're doing in London we could be done anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, eventually it will have to be. I mean, I think London is one of the most unsustainable cities on the planet. I think when you look at what's happening to, I mean, I don't know if you picked this up or whether I'd mentioned it in a previous show, that the big oil companies are actually moving out of oil. So they had the chief executive from Shell last week came out and said, you should regard us as a renewables and gas company. So essentially they no longer consider themselves to be an oil company. BP, I think, have said much the same thing. So all of these companies now are getting to the point that further oil exploration is too expensive. So
they're selling what instead?
Well, they'll still drill for gas because I think there's 20 to 30 years worth of gas ahead of oil. So essentially, whereas oil is probably peaking around about now, if it hasn't already, gas probably has another 10 to 20 years to go before it peaks. I mean, it may be shorter than that if the economics of it don't stack up. So certainly these guys are looking at gas as something they can still make money out of, whereas oil, they're starting to pull out of altogether. I mean, clearly they'll keep the fields that are already drilled, will keep going. But
so when they say they're a sustainable company, are they moving into selling solar or something?
Yeah, I mean, they'll do solar, they'll do offshore wind. I mean, whether they'll move into things like geothermal, it's possible. There's a whole range of different energy ways of generating energy they can go to.
Of course.
The problem they've got is that oil is the only liquid fuel that we have. So you can, for example, out of the gas, you can produce liquid hydrogen. I think fairly easily you can do methanol from gas. So they're alternatives, but they're not good alternatives. You know, I mean, at the moment, diesel is about as good as we've got. So if you want to run ships around the world,
I think about the water propelled. I mean, apart from the steam engine of the past, there was somebody who did some quite clever work on converting H2O into HO, using it to fuel a car. But
well, you can do it with that electrolysis. So you electrolyze the water, you get, well, I can't remember which way round it is, but you get hydrogen at one terminal, oxygen at the other. Now, you could burn it, but I think the most efficient way of doing it is in a hydrogen cell, where you actually use it to generate electricity. Then you use the electricity to power a motor.
Ah, so it's hydrogen powering.
Yeah.
Hydrogen batteries.
Yeah, so I mean, there isn't another way of getting energy out of water. The problem with it, if you do it with electrolysis, is it usually, well, I mean, it's always going to take more energy to produce the hydrogen than you put in. So you're always putting more energy in than you get out. I mean, that's just thermodynamics in action. You can never get more energy out of a system than you put in. Basically, because you lose some energy in the process, you can always get less. I mean, the same is true actually with battery storage. So in a sense, it doesn't matter if you've got sufficient electricity. So essentially, I mean, you can run an electric car either with a hydrogen cell or with a battery. I mean, they're both essentially the same thing.
Mm.
So you're better off regarding hydrogen as a battery, not as a fuel.
Yes, sorry, I kind of got that part. The hydrogen cell would be the way that it was run, but.
I mean, if you look at Norway and Iceland, Iceland runs a fleet of buses run on hydrogen cells. Norway, I think, I mean, they've got buses, they've got a ship that they've built that runs on a hydrogen motor. I mean, it's only a small inshore ship, but it's a start.
Yes, I've heard that was done some time ago, wasn't it? Some years ago.
Yeah, I mean, Iceland has the advantage, it's got all of those volcanoes underneath it to produce lots and lots of electricity out of. So, I mean, that's one of the few places on Earth that doesn't have to worry too much if the oil goes away.
It's not using it significantly already, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, geothermal at that scale. I mean, you can run geothermal power stations that will replace fossil fuel power stations if you're in an area that's got volcanoes. As you've got there's not much drilling needs to happen and you're into molten heat. You can do small scale geothermal here where you run some pipes deep into the ground and use the heat for keeping your house warm. That's doable, but you'd be hard pressed to generate electricity to any scale doing it here.
Not enough.
And I think one of the things with renewables is you're always looking to what is your local advantage. So, I mean, the two we have in the UK is plenty of wind and plenty of water.
Yes.
So, I mean, I don't know whether I mentioned, I probably did, that they've been building a small-scale hydro plant on the River Taff just down the road from me. So that's actually now open.
Excellent.
They opened that, I think, last Tuesday. So I actually cycled past it on Sunday morning. That will power, it's enough, I think, they reckon, to power between 300 and 500 houses.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So again, in and of itself, it isn't going. It's not going to solve our problems. But if you started putting those kind of plants in on all of the rivers up and down the UK, then you start to make a big dent. And whereas people complain about intermittency with sunlight and wind, other than those periods of time where we have really big droughts, most of our rivers flow sort of fairly steadily.
And the wind and the shore power as well, isn't there?
Well, I mean, there are plans for tidal lagoons up and down the Severn Estuary and Swansea Bay, as we have, I think it's the second biggest tidal range in the world here. So in a way, the insanity is not doing it. It's a huge energy resource. It's there for the taking. It's predictable. I mean, you can predict the tide times down to the last second. So we can know from that when we're going to be putting peak electricity out from it and when it will start to slacken with the tide. As I say, it's entirely predictable. So again, it's a good energy source.
Yes, that's been the argument, isn't it, for the Hinkley Point power station going ahead, that they say that renewables are unpredictable and that they're intermittent. And I'm just thinking, well, which renewables are you talking about? Because I'm sure that depends on which ones you're using.
Yeah, I mean, certainly hydropower and tidal power is there for the taking. Wave power to a lesser degree. I mean, it's harder to harness. But again, that's there pretty much all the time.
Lights are in and out every day, aren't they? So.
Yeah, I mean, wave power, you're going to have some intermittency just because some days it's like a mill pond, other days it's really blowing. But yeah, I mean, the Hinkley thing is shaping up to be a real disaster, whichever way it goes. I mean, I know the nuclear engineers in Britain are opposed to it. Their argument is you'd be better off setting up several cheaper, is what they call modular. It's basically where all of the power station is built in a factory, then assembled on site, which you can do with smaller scale nuclear that you can't do with something on the scale of Hinkley. Engineering terms, I mean, there are problems with the Hinkley design. The longer term problem is what the hell do you do with all the waste?
Somewhere else and pretend it doesn't exist. That's usually what happens, isn't it?
Well, that's what we've been doing up until now. Yeah, everybody's got plans to bury the things under mountains and hope nobody ever goes in there and hope it never leaks. You know, I mean, it's a horrible legacy to pass on to future generations. I think, in a sense, I mean, in responsibility terms, until you know what to do with the waste, you know, really, you shouldn't be doing it. I mean, it's one of our biggest failings, is this hope that somebody in future will figure it out. Yeah, which is why we're all still burning fossil fuels. Yeah,
what I find quite strange is that we've known since the 60s about, you know, how to use solar and wind power, but nobody's really done it. I think perhaps we were hoping that the government would pick it up and run with it, but instead of individuals, they're not sure.
I think it involved too much hassle all round. So it was easier to actually pretend that there wasn't a problem. You know, so if you like, none of the governments, I suppose Jimmy Carter's government in America started to tell people that, look, we're really going to have to change the way we do things. Now, when that came to the election in 1980, you had a choice between Carter, who was saying, look, you're going to have to leave your cars at home, we're going to have to do things differently. Or Ronald Reagan came along and said, no, you know, I'll sort it all out, you don't have to worry. Yeah, of course, everyone went for Reagan. Symbolically, one of the first acts of the Reagan government was to take the solar panels off the White House roof.
Disgusting.
Yeah, and I mean, that as a moment of symbolism, I mean, that was the point at which we lost the battle against climate change. Yeah, had we done it then, we could have actually eased the transition. We had plenty of time. Where we've got to now is, I mean, climate change is happening.
Oh, yes. All around. I think even the most dyed in the wool must be recognising that the weather is a bit odd.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading over the weekend that the water level, sea level rise is really stacking up in the USA on the eastern coast. It's because the ocean currents around the North Atlantic have slowed right down. So it used to be the water would circulate around the Atlantic. I mean, it was what caused us to have lots of warm air coming up. Because that's slowing down, it's almost like creating a wave up along the east coast of the United States. So they had data, I think, for 2010-11, where sea level rise along the east coast rose 4 inches in a year. And all of the predictions are that that's going to keep going.
It make a difference to people on the coast, at least.
Well, I mean, Wall Street is gone, so anyone that's worried about global financing, I mean, they've got to figure out, well, what are we going to do when there isn't a stock exchange in New York because New York's gone? Yeah, and again, nobody's thinking about it. It's just, oh, well, we'll hope somebody in future figures out a way of dealing with it.
Well, there's quite a few what you might call preppers in America. They seem to be big on how we're going to survive after.
Yes, not in government, unfortunately. No, I mean, I'd feel a lot more comfortable if somebody in government was actually recognizing, look, we have a pretty serious problem here. It may not hit us next week, but, you know, sometime within the next decade, we could start to see the early signs of it.
So I think we are seeing the early signs of it, they're just choosing to be blind to it or choosing to ignore it.
Well, I mean, we saw the flooding over last winter, and then 2 years before you had the flooding in Somerset. We had the railway line down to Devon and Cornwall got taken out. Yeah, those are the kind of events that we can start to see happening more and more often. Sooner or later, the barrier across the Thames is going to go and London is going to be underwater. It will be interesting to see what line government takes on it then.
I think it might sit up and take a little bit more note anyway, mightn't it?
Well, in a way, one of the problems we've got is because of the way the science has been presented, where people have talked about, well, 0.5 meter's sea level rise by 2050, a meter by 2100.
But we don't need to worry, it's sometime in the future.
I mean, it's in the future, but it's put out there as if that's it. And of course, that isn't it. You know, if we keep doing what we're doing, then for starters, those heights are going to go up and the time is going to get shorter. but it isn't like you get to 2100 and it stops. It's basically an ongoing thing. So yeah, it might be a meter by 2100, but then after that, it's going to be 1.5 meters by 2010. Yeah, and it will accelerate. So essentially we're not talking about, we'd be able to perhaps lift the foundations of Parliament so that the Houses of Parliament aren't underwater. Sooner or later, the Thames is going to be running through the debating chamber of the House of Commons. That's a fact. That's going to happen. The only question is when it happens. I always thought one of the best things we could do is actually paint a line around the debating chamber showing where the water level is likely to be at particular dates. So at least every time the MPs looked up when they were debating it, they'd see that line and realise just how much trouble they're in. Same thing with us down here. We've got the Welsh government here. There will come a day where the Welsh government's debating chamber will be in the Severn Estuary. Hopefully it won't be in my lifetime, but it looks set to happen. Scotland have done much more sense, where their parliament is built on top of a hill. When the rest of us have gone, the Scots will still be there.
Jolly good. At least there'll be a few human beings around to tell the tale. Yes. I was asked the question, I don't know if you saw it, I think you might have seen it in the group meeting, what does sustainability mean to you? And it was interesting to see there weren't very many people in that group, but what the responses are. What would you say sustainability really means? What actually does it mean?
I think what I said in the group, essentially there are two poles, if you like. So on the one hand, there's a lot of people that take sustainability to be maintaining the way of life that we have. So essentially we are where we are, how do we sustain what we've got? The opposite end of that would be, if you like, how do humans live in perfect harmony with the planet without causing any damage? I think the first pole of how do we keep what we've got, I don't think is possible. I think when campaigners and scientists over decades have been telling us that our way of life is unsustainable, they are actually correct. It cannot be sustained. On the other hand, the shift to the other extreme of how do we live in perfect harmony, well, probably we'd need to shrink the human population from 7.5 billion, probably down to about 500 million across the entire planet at most to be able to do that. I think, in my own terms, if a sustainable aim to me would be to work out what sort of energy and resources are we going to have available once fossil fuels, either voluntarily or compulsory, we stop burning them. So let's look at what else we have available to us. Then let's work out what kind of society and what kind of economy could we operate on those resources. Now, again, I don't think anyone's having that debate. There's what I call liberal denialism, which is essentially this idea that we can switch over to windmills and solar panels and everything will be fine. That, I think, is as dangerous in its way than the idea that climate change isn't happening.
Yes, although you can do an awful lot, and there are carbon neutral homes being built, and there are a lot of people creating more energy than they're using, those who have put solar and things in, isn't there?
Yes, I'm not saying that we would shift. When we stop using fossil carbon altogether, it's not that we'll suddenly go back to the Stone Ages and we'll suddenly have 7 billion people die. There is a standard of living that we can achieve using renewables, but we've got to configure it differently. So, go back to what I was saying about what's happening with the oil industry. We cannot operate a city like London that requires people to commute from hundreds of miles away every day if we haven't got any oil.
No.
Now, we can switch the rail network over to run on electricity. So it doesn't mean that we're not going to have travel at all, and it doesn't mean that people aren't going to be able to commute in and out of cities. But it means our capacity to do so is going to be very limited. There's only so many carriages you can put on each train, and there's only so many trains you can run each day. And quite simply, you cannot take all of the cars that we currently run in and out of our cities and move all of those people onto trains.
Or electric cars, which is the other. Or
no. I mean, there aren't the resources on the planet to actually make that many electric cars. Plus, I think, if the idea would be to switch everything that we currently run on oil and gas and coal over to electricity, actually, we haven't got the generating capacity from renewables to do it.
Even if we were to utilise all of those ideas and things that are around that we know about that haven't done yet.
Yeah, I mean, even with those, I mean, there are ways of running a very high standard of living doing it. There was a paper from a guy called Tom Murphy at Stanford University in the States last year. He's a professor of physics. But they'd calculated a way of running the economy on renewables, which would actually give us a very high standard of living. I mean, he talks about it, for America, it would be a step down. But he talks about being able to run something equivalent to the average living standards in Western Europe. Mm-hmm. But his point is we have to be making the change yesterday. That we're out of time on this. If we haven't built the renewable systems and we haven't worked out the ways that we're going to store energy capacity, then if that's forced on us through a collapse of the oil industry, then we're not going to do it.
Only the few people that actually have invested so far and brought their own home into an energy positive, at least. But then they still would then have to put in some storage capacity.
Yeah, I mean, there's still things in that circumstance that you could do. So, I mean, you could run whatever equipment you currently had, but bear in mind, a lot of what we do is networked. Mm. So, for example, I mean, I'd be able to get my computer going if I had a solar panel running, but I couldn't connect to anything externally if the internet had gone down.
Yeah. Mm.
Now, okay, Google and Apple, let's say it's Google, Apple, and Amazon have been investing very heavily in generating their own power. So I think those companies see the threat. I mean, they're starting to make sure the data centers do operate. I think government probably is a long way behind the curve. One of the measures of it to me is I would expect government, if it's got any sense whatsoever, to be knocking its own electricity and gas bills out by fitting its own renewables. So you start to imagine how much they could cut off your and my council tax bill if every council building in the county had solar panels on the roof. Or if every building was insulated to the point that it wasn't losing heat. Those would be huge savings. It seems to me councils should be doing that. Mm. And actually both in climate terms and looking ahead to the idea that energy prices are likely to rise in the future. So essentially, as energy gets in short supply, then demand for it will exceed supply and the price will go higher. So in those terms, government and local government should be protecting itself now. And certainly all of us should be, but it's much harder for us. I mean, putting solar panels up is an expensive business.
Oh, it certainly is. I mean, some of us are lucky enough to be in a position to be able to do that and have, and I would say quite a number of my clients have. And they're generating more over a period of a year than they use. However, that's not all the time. You see the smart panels that are now being generated, that flicks backwards and forwards considerably during the day. So, the sun comes out and they're producing power and it's going into the grid, and the cloud goes over and they're not producing power and they're collecting from the grid, and that's happening all the time, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. So although over the period of a year they are producing more than they're using, presumably that's mostly during the summer, and you've got the heaviest use in the winter when it's cold and you're wanting some more heating. And so I would say they seem to be, from those that I've been looking more carefully at these things more lately, considering doing it myself, that if you had to rely totally on that, your as you say, it's not being generated evenly. It's being generated some large quantities and then nothing, and the large quantities and then nothing. So you need to have some form of storage so that you can pick it up and use it when it's not being generated, as well as, of course, adjusting the way you live your life and perhaps using those bits of equipment that you need more in time to suit the power generation rather than necessary for your own suit.
Yeah, I think the problem, though, which you've identified there, is that there are times of year where you're just not going to get energy out of your solar panels. So whereas this time of year you'll be over generating, where you could say, well, okay, if you had the sun out this afternoon, you could run the washing machine, and essentially that's free energy. Then the problem is that you get to a wet sort of Wednesday afternoon in December where there's barely any sunlight in the course of the day, and you've barely got enough electricity coming out of the system to heat the kettle. And there isn't an easy way of storing energy that far apart. So, there are battery systems that you could install. One of the other things that's quite interesting is they're looking at using water heating. So if you've got a good water tank that's well insulated, basically you could heat your water from the electricity system in the daytime, and then you've got the heat generated for the evening. So it's a way of at least storing energy, albeit not electrical. So there are ways and means of doing that, and it can be done on a localized scale. And I think Tom Murphy's point was far more doing that kind of stuff to store energy than hoping that we'd all get a Tesla battery to go in our house, which again, there aren't enough resources on the planet. There's not enough lithium available to make that many lithium-ion batteries. So unless somebody can find a battery that actually uses entirely common materials, then we're still stuck, because you get to a system where effectively those people that can afford it will have the systems and everybody else is out. And I think the problem with that is politically it won't work. I think people will put up with a lot, but you get to a point, every revolution there's ever been has started with a bread strike. So essentially, it's the moment that people can't feed themselves, that's when they take to the streets, that's when you get the violent explosions. And, now I think energy probably gets us to that point. So if people haven't got energy, they can't eat, because they won't be able to work. The shops aren't going to be running properly, a whole series of reasons there. But if we had a situation where a small part of the population had its own off-grid systems and the majority were totally disconnected, I think that would cause a revolution. So I think although it's possible for that to happen in theory, I think in practice it's very difficult.
Yes, and there's also, as you say, the food bit as well. That's the bit that I find quite strange, I suppose. I suppose I've been a bit of a food obsessed since quite young, let's say. And I've always grown a lot of my own. And I would say that this year in particular, it's been tough. It's been really difficult to get much out of the ground, for me anyway, because I'm not spending every evening watering. And so in the spring it was very wet and it was hard to get the seedlings up without them washing away. And now it's very dry and the fruits should be setting, and there's nothing like the yield, because I guess if you've been out watering every night, then that would have been, I would have got a much bigger yield. But the blackcurrant shrinking up on the bush, and the blueberries and the peas and beans, the peas going straight to pod instead of really developing, and I've got loads of potatoes, and I have got a significant beans and peas, but nothing like the yield that would have got in the past, and particularly the squashes, the courgettes and all that demand a lot of water. They grew beautifully in the spring, absolutely beautifully, and then they're just gone yellow and looking pretty, poor.
Yeah, this is where the idea that we could very rapidly switch from eating out of supermarkets to growing our own, this is where it falls down. Because even somebody that's got the background you've got in agriculture can end up having a bad year just because the seasons aren't right. Now those of us that are, don't even have that level of knowledge, I mean, just to go from, oh, I'll put some seeds in the ground and hope something comes up. Well, actually, yes, if you're lucky, you'll get some food out there, but you're not going to live on it. So again, it's important that we preserve a food supply.
I really do think we've got some exciting technology in the aquaponics bit. I'm just amazed at what can be done on relatively small space with recirculating stuff. So you're not using the resource over and over and over, but you do have to have some. You have to have some power to run it. And I'm really quite surprised that commercial units are not taking that up more. It does have its drawbacks. It's not perfect. Certain crops grow better than others, and obviously it's relatively new technology, so we've still got to find what those might be out, really. The wetter crops that like warm, wet environments seem to really go for it. And I would say we could probably grow tropical crops here with little effort, really. So you could still have quite a variety of stuff, but you certainly wouldn't start growing cereals in that form. It just wouldn't happen. It just wouldn't work. The cost to set up relative to putting it in the ground would be crazy. Unless, of course, you didn't have the fuel tractor. I'm guessing that could change things dramatically.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought one of the things that we do, and it would make sense to do it in the event of an oil crunch, is to make sure that agriculture is getting sufficient oil to run the machinery. Because again, I'm not saying that we're going to run out of oil as a resource. What I'm saying is the economics of it are going to make it more and more scarce.
It's being used, even if it is headed towards the food production, it's still going to be a vast expense, and therefore the food is going to be much more expensive, and can people afford it?
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, you've got to have almost a double subsidy. So essentially, government has got to tax something else in the economy in order to make sure food prices stay reasonable. I mean, that may have to involve rationing if we get into a real crisis.
I would think so, pretty quickly.
But I mean, in terms of agriculture, if we're not growing enough food, then it makes no sense to be allowing anything else to have access to petroleum. As I say, I don't know how rapidly all of this is going to happen. I mean, it looks like we're going to get another economic crisis, if not this year, maybe next. And that will see demand destruction even further. So the oil companies are even less likely to invest in exploration. So, we've still got 2 or 3 years where projects that they'd already started are coming online. But we're now getting to a point where what's coming online next year isn't going to replace what we lose this year. So, for example, the North Sea a lot of the fields are actually pretty much depleted. So a lot of the companies in the North Sea are now looking at decommissioning. And nobody is going to be in the business particularly of looking for further drilling there. So as that starts to happen around the world, you've got the problem that we will have less available just because we're not replacing what we've got coming out of the ground now. But we are now, I mean, we're looking at 93, 94 million barrels a day. That's an awful lot of oil. Yes. The problem with it is we're accustomed to it. So the problem is that once that starts to go downhill. So if next year we only produce 92 million barrels, that extra million barrels has got to be lost somewhere in the system. So somebody's not going to be driving. Now you have all of the vagaries of the international market to see who takes that loss. But I mean, the bottom line eventually, as the price, as the amount of oil goes down, is that you get more competition on price. But we reach a point where we can't afford to buy it at that price. So essentially, demand chases supply downwards. So if you like, you can get spikes in the price of oil where maybe it'll go back to $70 or $100 a barrel. But the moment it does that, the impact on the economy is such that somebody drops off the bottom, if you like. And each time it does it, another group of people drop off the bottom. So it's that group of people that just says, right, I'm selling the car, I'm not going to do it anymore. And gradually that starts to go higher and higher up the income scale. And you get to a point where people just stop driving, that it just isn't worth it.
You mentioned about the electric cars, and you were saying there isn't enough resources for us all to swap over to an electric car. Why do you think that is?
There's not enough lithium ion for the batteries. I think there are some rare earth metals that are in short supply that are used in the electronic systems. The steel we could recycle. Probably a lot of the tires we could recycle, but each tire takes about 7 gallons of oil to make. So if oil is getting expensive, tires are going to be getting expensive. So yes, we can do them. We're starting from a very small base. Globally, electric cars make up less than 3% of all the vehicles on the road.
They're very expensive.
Yeah, I mean, the price is coming down and demand is going up. So, I mean, yes, they'll settle down a bit. I see Renault have got an electric car that I think sells, I think they said new for about 18,000, which is getting into the sort of price you'd pay for a petrol car. So they are getting to be competitively priced. Running them is a lot cheaper. At the moment, the cost of electricity for an electric car is a lot less than the cost of petrol for a petrol one. Plus, you get grants from the government, and you don't have to pay tax on all the rest of it. So at the moment, they're right. It's worth doing if you drive a lot, not if you commute distances. So I think range-wise, the best you get is just over 100 miles.
100 miles, yeah.
I think there's this one my son bought recently. His does about 80. And it isn't, whereas a petrol car, you just pull into the forecourt, fill up, and 5 minutes later you're away. You can do a fast charge at the motorway services, but what they call fast is about half an hour. And that depends on nobody else being at the power-up point. So essentially, the more people that have these things, the more you're likely to have to queue. And
one of the things I thought was really odd, really. We've known about, car parking areas are just big spaces where people could put cars. I've never understood why they don't stick a load of solar panels over the top of them and charge up these points.
Yeah, solar panels, there's more scope for, because although there is some rare earths used in the electronics, solar panels themselves are silicon, which is readily available across the planet. It's more likely that we'll be able to put solar panels everywhere than it is that we'll build lots of electric cars. Again, I wonder though, so you look at something like Uber and you look at the Google driverless cars, I wonder whether driving in the future will actually be about us effectively using somebody else's vehicle.
I'm sure we will. Absolutely sure we'll have to get much better communal transport systems running. But I still can't quite understand why. To me, it seems like such obviousness. If you have a car, if you own a car park, if you covered it with solar panels today, I mean, even if you're not powering an electrical point, if you own the car park and you're powering some other thing or other, the cost of putting one up can't be that excessive relative to what you're going to get back, particularly since you've then got a nice shaded car park,
Yeah, I mean, if you go onto eBay, you can buy the solar cells for pence.
I think they can even print them now, can't they, with 3D printers?
Yes, I mean, it's the installation that costs, not the panel itself. So if you chose to make your own panel, if you had the expertise to wire it up properly, it's basically a question of getting the cells, soldering them together, putting them in an aluminium frame and putting a glass sheet over them. And voila, that's your solar panel. The cost is paying the guy that goes up on the roof and fits them in such a way that they don't blow off. Plus wiring it up so that it goes into the grid properly and it's metered and all of the other stuff that goes with it. So the panels themselves are getting dirt cheap. In fact, I think I read somewhere over the last fortnight that solar panels are now the cheapest per energy form of generation on the planet. So it's now cheaper to get energy from a solar panel than it is from oil. As all of these things have to be paid for in advance, and logically to me, government, I think, should be putting panels everywhere. If anyone's got any business sense, basically you should be setting up companies that effectively basically run on the feed-in tariff. So essentially you effectively use somebody else's roof space. So it's basically a company could come around to my house and say, look, we'll put panels on the roof. We get paid when the government pays the feed-in tariff, we get paid that. So we're renting you the panels, but you're free to use whatever electricity they generate in the course of the day. And on that basis alone, it should be possible to have a company that effectively covers the entire country with panels.
I believe there are companies out there now that are offering those sorts of services. I'm fairly sure I've seen, solar power for free. We'll tariff.
Again, I think as the price of panels comes down, we should see more of that. Because it's in their interest, it's in your interest as a householder to let them use your roof space. I think it's a drawback if your roof faces the wrong direction, but sort of anyone that's either west or south facing, you should be fine. And I would imagine people will be looking into alternative, so whether we could do small scale wind generation. There are people designing smaller scale wind turbines, but again, it's whether we can wire those in. But it's entirely possible to do that. And I think it solves a lot of the problems we have. It doesn't solve all of them. So, going back to the car problem, and the point is that we have millions and millions of diesel and petrol cars. It is very difficult. I can't see us affording a scrappage scheme where we scrap all of the petrol cars and sell new electric ones to everyone. At the moment, I don't think anyone's in the business of retrofitting electric systems into petrol cars.
Don't even know that's possible.
Well, I don't think it is, but if somebody could crack that one, so okay, how do we take an existing chassis and body,
or common car?
Yeah, if we could find a way of putting an electric motor in instead of the petrol motor, and
it might possibly work in the big chunky, the 4x4s or whatever.
Maybe, yeah, but again, I could see that if somebody could figure out how to do that, I could see that working. Because you haven't got the manufacturing costs then of the rest of the car. As I say, I don't think anyone's doing it. It probably turned out to be a lot more difficult. But if we're relying on replacing, basically old cars with new ones, then you're probably looking at a 20 to 25 year turnover. And basically, I just don't think we've got the time, either in climate terms or in energy crunch terms to do it.
But even if we were to take that up ourselves, individuals were to take up, which some people will, how are you going to get around if you haven't got a petrol car? There are animal-towed vehicles of various sorts, but I've seen goats tow vehicles as well as husky dogs and as well as horses, but you're obviously going to have the ground to keep these things on, and yes, the dogs might be the easiest ones to keep. You haven't need so much space for them. They can sit next to your armchair, but they don't travel anywhere near as fast.
Well, yeah, you have to fill them up even if you don't use them.
Yes.
One of the benefits of a petrol engine is you only fill it up when you need to use it. You only need fuel when you need it. Whereas if you're going to use a horse or a dog, you've got to feed it even on the days when you're not using it. Which is one of the reasons why in very early human history they struggled to keep animals.
Yes, and when you're coming back to when you're really what you're going to need more than anything else is food, because it's not necessarily quite as readily available, and certainly not to your door. You need a heck of a lot of ground to feed yourself, as we've discussed.
Yeah, I mean, it's
10 acres, and I don't think he was far wrong, really. Although with modern technology, if you have the modern technology, you can get away with a lot less space. But you have to have invested to get that technology in place first. Although I'd say a simple aquaponic system is quite easy to put together. It's just like a Meccano set, and kids can do it. The skill to run that successfully, and ideally to put it under a cover so that you don't have the pest control problems. And I think you really do have to consider that quite carefully, because you can't start putting sprays on. And if you grow things outside, as we do normal vegetables and fruit and stuff, that's fine. But you really, its whole process is about a closed system, so you're going to use the stuff over and over. You don't want it being contaminated with stuff that you don't want in there. So I'm guessing they really do need to have some sort of a closed system for them to work really successfully. Although you can, take the waste product from fish growing in a pond and grow food with it. You've got a lot more problems with keeping your pests and diseases off if they're external.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the big problem with it at this stage, I mean, as with all of the sort of sustainable foods, is that we currently have a global agricultural system that's providing too much cheap food in that sense. So for a lot of people, the issue is just going to be, well, why should I bother? Effectively, I can go a mile down the road, there's a supermarket there, it will have shelves full of food. Why would I bother building a system? And I mean, it's why I think, so the point to me would be, if we're going to do hydroponics and aquaponics, the systems we need to have in place have to use readily accessible materials. So it's almost worth looking at building systems out of scrap.
Very much.
Yeah. So effectively, if you need piping, can you just sort of grab hold of your drain pipe off your house if need be and use that? I mean, I think things like glass isn't going to be a problem, and glass is fairly easy to make and fairly abundant. So getting stuff under cover shouldn't be that much of an issue.
Although you need a heck of a lot of heat to produce glass.
Yeah, yes, I mean, it could well be if we're out of power altogether, but then, I mean, we're not totally out of power. Yeah, I mean, I think it's, as if you like, one of the problems we have now is it's very easy, because we're still plugged into a globalized economy, to sort of say, oh, well, I need X amount of this, I'll just go online and order it. So try to think through, well, okay, what if there was a situation where there is no longer an online to go to? Because the global finance systems have broken down, nobody is going to ship stuff from the other side of the world because they're scared that they'll not get paid. So we're down to, what have I got available locally that I could use? Well, probably a lot of this material is out there if we know where to look. Because there's an awful lot of waste plastic around that we could use. There's an awful lot of scrap around that we could use. I mean, probably at some point somebody will even dig into the landfills.
Yes, when I saw a little YouTube clip of a Polish boy who'd set himself up with basically a strip of metal that he'd cut some grooves and sharpened grooves into, and a pole, just stuck a plastic bottle on it, started it off, and reeled out the plastic bottle and cut it into strips effectively. So he was using, he put different ones in so he could cut a little tiny strip or a sort of centimetre strip. And then he was using these to bind things together, because obviously if you warm it, that shrinks, that really holds tight. And he was making steps and all kinds of things out of, obviously, by using it to bind wood pieces together, or a fishing line, and I have to say, I think that was probably one of the more clever things I've seen recently on renewing something that's thrown away every day. And here was something that you could really, or very, very useful material. And I had seen a while back, people were making sort of effectively a cold house, I suppose, rather than a glass house, out of using plastic bottles to create the walls and roofing area, so to use it as a greenhouse or a coal train, I suppose, probably more realistically spoken. But it crossed my mind that if that was woven plastic, you'd have a lot less. You'd need a lot less of them, and you could have probably tighten that up, especially if you warmed it, so that you actually created a solid sheet rather than a spaces between. You could then probably use it much more readily as a greenhouse material.
Yeah, and I guess at this stage, it's picking up ideas like that and putting them together that we need to all be doing, because they're the sort of skills that come in handy if, for any reason, the system we rely on is taken out, whether temporarily or permanently. I mean, I don't see it going permanently. As I say, I think we're on just a downhill trajectory, if you like, where we're moving to a situation that has less energy. Yeah, it's down to us really as to what that society and that economy look like. If you like,
I mean, there is so much energy out there. I mean, it's coming not just from the sun and the wind and the waves. I mean, we've just got huge amounts of it. We're just not applying ourselves to really learning how to harness it.
Yeah, I mean, part of the problem is from coal onwards, fossil carbon has been such a gift to us in that sense. Once you start to utilize first coal, then oil, it raises the question, why would I bother trying to capture sunlight or wind?
Well, we haven't, haven't we? That's the crunch, we haven't.
Yeah, so I mean, we're now getting to this, because for a long time, people just looked at the amount of oil and gas and coal in the ground and said, well, we're never going to run out. Yeah, I mean, there's still more oil, coal and gas under the ground than we've used in the last 300 years. The problem is that we've used all of the good stuff, and what's under the ground is the hard to get stuff. And the problem we're facing, therefore, isn't a geological problem in that sense, it's an economic one. Because it's going to cost you more to get the energy out of the ground than you can make on it when you sell it.
Yes.
Yes.
Slightly to the food growing aspect, and obviously because you need warmth for growing crops as well, particularly if you want to grow during the winter. But you were saying you had problems with slugs in your garden. Sorry, I'm changing the subject rather, but because I'm aware of the time's getting on. Did you manage to put us together some slug trap?
I have. I've got all of the pieces to make one. I've got one that's half made and one that's fully made.
Oh, fantastic.
And I mean, they are dead simple. So this is what you need. So you have just an ordinary squash bottle or a pop bottle, sort of any plastic bottle that you've finished with. You need your ubiquitous gaffer tape. And you need your Stanley knife. And essentially you're going to cut. You want a bit of the body of the bottle, but you want to cut the top off, and you end up with, all you do is invert it. And having pushed those together, you tape them round and you get that. And basically that down the middle is a funnel. What you're going to do is put enough beer, and I think I said last time it can be fairly cheap supermarket beer. They seem to like that. So you want to fill that up so it's just underneath the end of the funnel. And your slug gets a sniff of the beer. You put this out in the garden somewhere under a bush or somewhere that's shady where the slugs are going to be. And your slugs, instead of sniffing out your tomatoes or your cabbages, they'll sniff the beer and they'll home in on it and say, right, I'm up for some of that. They'll crawl in down the funnel, plop in the other end and drown in the beer.
I think I can think of a few chaps who wouldn't mind that one.
On balance, being given the choice of sort of losing your life by being dipped in salt or falling into a vat of beer and drowning while you're drunk, probably drowning while you're drunk is probably the better. But it does seem to work. The last ones that I put down a couple of weeks ago, I ended up with 10 to 15 slugs in each one. So I think if you put these out regularly over the course of a year, you'll probably get your slug population down to something more manageable. Which, if the weather that we've been having the last few winters is anything to go by, we're going to need to start doing. As one of the things that we had when we had cold winters where you get a week of snow, is that'll freeze far enough down into the ground that it'll kill a lot of the slugs off over the winter. Whereas the kind of wet but warm winters that we've been having, probably the last 4 or 5 years, basically all of the slugs from last year will have survived into this year, and the new ones will come out. So their population is really exploding. So as I say, the cost of these, I mean, it's the cost of a tin of supermarket beer, effectively. I mean, the plastic bottle you were going to recycle anyway. The gaffer tape isn't that expensive. It's only one wrap around the bottle that you need. So what's a tin of cheap supermarket beer at the moment? About 40p. Yeah, as I say, you haven't got to use expensive stuff because they turn their nose up at expensive beer. It's cheap stuff they like. So it's, yeah, I mean, there's slugs. I wouldn't touch the stuff, but slugs seem to enjoy it.
And then I suppose you need to put up a few bird tables and put the dead slugs on it, and then
well, that'd be like having a liqueur chocolate for you and I.
That's what I was thinking. Perhaps scrap birds would like that.
So then you'll see your magpies falling off the bird table sideways.
Yes, I certainly think we should be encouraging a few more birds into the garden as well, albeit that they do eat the strawberries unless you've got nets over them.
I'm very lucky here. We have a railway embankment at the back, and railway embankments are like nature reserves nowadays. So we have plenty of various small birds in and around. We've more recently had a couple of jays have moved in. And we have the ubiquitous magpies everywhere as well.
Fantastic. I wonder whether we'd one of the things that our allotments association are not keen on us putting ponds or water sources in because of the risk of, we do have a lot of children running around, but on the other hand, the old frogs are very important to have about.
Yeah, now frogs will eat slugs as well. So, I think I've got a couple of frogs in my garden, but I haven't seen them recently. As I said, whether or not they're eating that many slugs, I don't know, but they don't seem to be.
Yes. We've got quite a few in our garden, and at home, not on the allotment particularly, but and they do seem to do a pretty good job. But then what tends to happen is the slug population increases to make up for it.
Yeah. So anyway, there's my slug trap, which I've tested it out and it works.
Excellent.
As I say, it's next to no cost. I mean, you recycle well. I mean, if you're squeamish, you can throw the whole thing away, complete with slugs in it. If you're not so squeamish, you can empty the thing out and either recycle the bottle or use it again.
Pop it on the bird table. I reckon that's got to be the best bit.
Yeah, I mean, you have to untape it in order to get the slugs out. But certainly, yes, you can do that. And yeah, then you can either tape it back up and use it again, or recycle it and use the next one.
I suppose you could use some big paper clips instead of taping it. Would that work, do you think?
No, you need a seal around the funnel bit to stop the beer leaking out when you fill it up. So it's got to be a tight seal. No, I mean, I did wonder whether it was worth sort of sending away to China to have hundreds made with a screw tap or something on them, but so I don't think it's worth it.
I've seen a few in the garden centres which have a sort of a lid thing, and the idea is that they'll crawl up underneath it and go in and you can take the lid off afterwards. And I suppose that's another take on the same sort of thing. But then obviously you have to buy those outright, whereas if you've got a load of plastic bottles, it doesn't cost you too much to with the top off and put the tape on.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things you can use a plastic bottle for after you've done this is put some soil in there and grow herbs out of it. As you can do what's called a bottle stack, So essentially, if you had that, you'd cut holes in the side. That's where your herbs would grow out of, but then you stack the bottles up one on top of the other. And basically, if you put water in the top one, it will run through. Yeah, again, it's 101 uses for an empty plastic bottle.
Yes. So I'll keep my cleaning stuff for next time.
Yeah. Okay.
But I want to just quickly say before we move on, I did do the lemon and rosemary vinegar idea that we spoke about last time. I've been putting it to the good use to see what it is most effective against. Obviously, anything where you need a little bit of acid, not too strong. So light cleaning around, sort of line scale off the glass, very effective. I used it for if you mix it half and half with salt and vinegar for your teacups and tea stains and sink staining, fruit stains and tea stains. Fantastic. They really do come up nicely. It does shine up stainless steel in kitchens, commercial kitchens and the like, where they're not allowed to use we did once use bleach on the surface. You're not allowed to use that anymore. Very effective at keeping them all clean and hygienic, ready for food preparation. So yeah, and some metals, brass in particular, are quite good as a polish. Not only silver, it would tend to, well, I suppose you could use it, but you'd need to wash it off pretty quick because it would corrode over a period of time. But otherwise, we've got all sorts of things at our disposal for cleaning, but we'll go into that another time. Thank you very much, Tim, for your slug trap today, and I think definitely need to put them on my allotment. It's one of those things I've been thinking about. I didn't do, and my cabbages have certainly had a fair old hammering this year.
Oh, there we are.
Thank you very much. Oops. Come over here to turn off the system.